Chapter 567. The curtain of the carriage moved again. Jingwon opened her eyes and saw that Sun Yilin had appeared again. His face no longer had that strange expression, but the scar on his face had increased by at least 10% compared to before. Sun Yilin, on the other hand, was very calm. It was as if the previous embarrassment had never happened. If it were not for the special situation, Jingwon would have praised his good composure. Maybe it's presumptuous, but I still want to ask. Shouldn't young Master Sun tell me something? Sun Yilin smiled. There was no gentleness like before. Instead, there was a strange sense of fear. There's nothing to say. Jingwon stared at him for a moment and closed her eyes. Her intention to refuse to communicate with him was obvious. Sun Yilin seemed to be unaware. He sat down, poured a glass of water, and took a sip. His action was as if he was tasting the best wine in the world, with some intoxication. During the whole process, his eyes were on Jingwon's face. So, what he was tasting was not water or wine, but beauty. Wanwan, no matter what kind of life you've been living in the past, whether it's bitter on the outside or sweet on the inside, I can guarantee that I'll do my best to give you the best of everything. There won't be anyone else by your side. I can even treat the child in your belly as my own. So, can you forget about the past? Sun Yilin said to himself wishfully. He did not get a response from Jingwon, but he was not angry. He continued to look forward to a beautiful future. From the picturesque scenery in Jiangnan to the vast snowfield in the north, from the treasures in the sea along the coast to the magnificent mountains and fields, everything was so beautiful. However, without a good mood, no matter how beautiful things were, they were equal to nothing. No matter how much he yearned for something, if the person who accompanied him was not the one who cared about it, he would become dim and lose interest. Jingwon finally could not listen to it anymore. She opened her eyes and said, "Young Master Sun, aren't you too self-righteous? Have you ever asked me if I was willing? It's okay. As long as you forget the past, you'll only see me in the future. At that time, you'll definitely be willing." Sun Yilin's voice was exceptionally gentle. He even reached out and gently stroked Jingwon's hair. Jingwon's pupils shrank. She didn't feel any warmth. Instead, she felt as if she was being stared at by a poisonous tongue. Her hair stood on end. She didn't know anything about goo worms, so she didn't know how scary they were. She didn't know if there was really a goo worm that could make people forget their past. If there was, then it was definitely something that Jingwon didn't want to see the most. Is Wanwan afraid? Don't worry, it'll be fine. You won't feel any pain. It'll be very easy and simple. Jingwon pursed her lips. Actually, she still didn't understand. What was it that caused the former #1 young master in the capital to become like this? Could it be that it was only because he found out that her husband had disrupted their marriage? Was she really that important to him? They had only met a few times and didn't know each other well. She didn't think that she was that special. Why did he miss her so much? No matter how she looked at it, it was like a big joke. Jingwon really wanted to ask, "Do you really like me?" Or was it because of the unwillingness in his heart, coupled with the fact that someone else had done something to turn what was originally a normal relationship into a special one? Turning ordinary love into obsession? Or was it because of some other factors that caused him to turn into a demon? Jingwon didn't ask any of these questions. "Where are you taking me?" Jingwon asked. She originally thought that they were going to a place where her husband was, but now she wasn't so sure. Sun Yilin smiled. "Why, Wanwan, do you want to elope with me directly?" "I wanted to, but it won't work. If we don't settle some things, even if we elope, we won't have a peaceful life. Although I don't want you to see anyone other than me, I don't want you to stay in one place forever. So, I have to get rid of all the future troubles." After getting the answer she wanted, Jingwon closed her eyes again. Sun Yilin's current appearance was really ugly. It wasn't his appearance, but his attitude and his heart. If this continued, Jingwon was worried that she would vomit. "Wanwan, you're actually very happy, right? To be able to see him again. I actually don't understand how someone like Li Hongyuan could gain your favor. Clearly, you are the one who can't tolerate men being half-hearted." How can you let bygones be bygones just because he changed his mind? He used to change people around him constantly, and it's highly likely that he will do so again in the future. Do you think that he will always stay by your side wholeheartedly? That's impossible. I'm different. Even now, I haven't had any physical contact with any woman. Besides, Wan, don't you think you're being unfair? Li Hongyuan has a lot of debts. I only had a small problem with my body, and it was set up by others. Our marriage is over just like that. Sun Yilin. Jingwan couldn't take it anymore. She opened her eyes and looked at him coldly. What I do now, and what I do in the future has nothing to do with you. Also, you'd better be clear about one thing. Even if no one else interfered with our previous marriage, do you think it's okay? Even if you were set up by others, it's because the loophole in your body was too obvious. Others didn't have to do anything to make you suffer. What's wrong? Has your temperament changed, and even your mentality has decreased to that of a 3-year-old? You're acting like I'm ungrateful and heartless in order to climb up the social ladder. Sun Yilin, let me tell you, I don't owe you anything. Don't nag in my ear. Do you know that you're really annoying? A trace of hurt flashed across Sun Yilin's eyes. He didn't even notice it, but his expression was still calm. Wan, is that how you think of me? That's really sad. But it's okay. I know that pregnant people are a little temperamental and often can't control their emotions. If you're unhappy, you can vent it out. I'll forgive you. Jingwon actually regretted saying those words after she said them. She was afraid that she would offend Sun Yilin in a moment of carelessness. If that happened, she would be the one to suffer, especially the child in her belly. In the end, when she heard Sun Yilin's words, she really wanted to vomit. What kind of person was this? He was the real perverted lunatic, wasn't he? Jingwan suppressed the anger in her heart and really decided not to say another word. After that, Sun Yilin continued to whisper in Jingwan's ear. He didn't say anything in an orderly manner. He said whatever came to his mind and didn't mind that he was thirsty. For a full hour, Jingwan could be considered to have seen it thoroughly. It was also the first time that she realized that there were also times when a person who read too many books had a bad side. Young Master Sun, can you please leave? This princess wants to change clothes. This kind of thing was usually quite embarrassing. But now, Jingwan didn't feel it at all. Sun Yilin still wanted to continue and prepared to leave with a little regret. But when he lifted the curtain of the carriage, he turned back and looked down at her condescendingly. Wan, I don't like how you call yourself, so I hope you'll pay attention next time. I can't bear to hurt you, but even a clay figurine has a temper. I may not be able to suppress it all the time. I won't do anything to you, but it doesn't mean that I'll be so tolerant to others. Sun Yilin, what do you think of your sister with what you're doing now? If you let her know, what will she think? Sun Yilin's expression didn't change. He was calm and unruffled. Wan, how many people do you think will know about this in the end? She will still be like how she was in the Luo family. I thought you would say that when we conquer the capital, you'll even give her a title of nobility. Jingwan said sarcastically. I'm not that ambitious. Qi Yuan may be declining day by day, but it's not that bad. Obviously, Sun Yilin was admitting that he had defected to the enemy country. Since that's the case, you should know that you may not succeed in this matter. What will you do when the time comes? Don't I still have you? You've done a lot for her. I believe that you won't vent your anger on her because of me. Yes, I won't. But she's in the Luo family and has to face the Luo family every day. When the time comes, will I be able to change her situation with just one sentence? Everyone has to rely on themselves to live their own lives. Sun Yilin got down from the carriage, and his voice was a little shaky. Jingwan secretly clenched her fists and took a deep breath to suppress her anger. Blackie quickly got into the carriage to serve her. Her eyes were full of worry. When she saw that Jingwan's clothes were neat and she was in good spirits, she heaved a sigh of relief. Your Highness, don't worry, I'm fine. Sun Yilin won't do anything to me. You should take good care of yourself. Blackie clenched her fists and her eyes were burning with anger. She looked like she wanted to chop Sun Yilin into pieces. Your Highness, what happened to him? How did he become like this? Blackie was angry, but she also could not believe it. There was a trace of pity in her voice. They were all familiar with Sun Yilin's good reputation. Who knows? Jingwan's voice was a little muffled. Subsequently, Blackie helped Jingwan to change her clothes.
Fu Rong also came to help.
However, she was coldly refused by Blackie. If she still had doubts at the beginning, how could she not know now? In Blackie's eyes, Fu Rong was an ungrateful ingrate. It was already her limit to not beat her. How dare she hang around in front of her and Her Highness? She was really looking for death.
Fu Rong, Blackie is enough. You don't have to come again.
Jingwan said in a low voice. Fu Rong's eyes darkened. Your Highness, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid at any time. Then she squatted down and turned away. Her footsteps were still not light or heavy. What is it? Your Highness is not afraid. It's you who are despicable, Blackie said hatefully. Jingwan was thoughtful. Fu Rong seemed to be implying something. She didn't just come to comfort her. From that day on, Sun Yilin appeared from time to time. He didn't spend as much as the first day, and Jingwan could basically completely ignore him. Later on one day, it seemed that someone came, and the itinerary suddenly accelerated. Jingwan thought that Sun Yilin slowed down the itinerary, which made the people behind him dissatisfied. The itinerary was accelerated. Compared to before, Jingwan was indeed a little uncomfortable. However, it was not a big deal. Her appetite was a little weaker, her spirit was a little worse, and there was some faint soreness in her body. Blackie saw it in her eyes and was anxious in her heart. Sun Yilin's worries were also expressed. He even had a dispute with the other party's people. In the end, the itinerary slowed down a little. Therefore, Blackie's resentment against him weakened a little. Occasionally, she looked at Sun Yilin with a complicated expression. Jingwan smiled, with a little weakness. She was really a straightforward girl. Her mood could change so easily. After traveling like this for nearly 6 or 7 days, the carriage stopped again. Because the road before was still smooth, Jingwan slept in the carriage and was a little drowsy. Jingwan only thought that this time stop was similar to before. It was just a break in the middle. Until Sun Yilin once again boarded the carriage. Wan, you will soon be able to see our Jin Qin Wang. You say, if he knew that you have been eating and living with me all this time, and that I carried you to him, what do you think he would do? Jingwan was completely awake. Her heart was a little excited. She opened her eyes. If that's really the case, then congratulations. You are one step closer to the road to the underworld. Wan, by saying this, do you think that he won't have any ill feelings towards you? Is Jin Qinwang's breadth of mind that broad? Jingwan mockingly tugged at the corner of her mouth. Not to mention that there was nothing between her and Sun Yilin. Even if there was, a certain someone's anger would only be vented on Sun Yilin and the people behind him. No matter how terrible things he did, he would never hurt a single strand of her hair. This kind of 100% trust seemed like it couldn't be torn apart. In Sun Yilin's eyes, it was especially dazzling. He felt particularly hateful and had the urge to destroy it. Why couldn't it belong to him? The hand that fell on Jingwan's had followed her hair and fell to her neck, slightly exerting force. Jingwan's expression became colder and colder. She looked at Sun Yilin without the slightest fear. She completely ignored the scar on his face that was once again squirming and expanding. Sun Yilin suddenly let go. He buried his head and took 2 deep breaths. When he raised his head again, the scar on his face had once again expanded and stopped squirming. Other than that, there was nothing else. Wan, I'm sorry. I didn't want to hurt you. I really didn't want to. Don't blame me. Jingwan didn't say a word. Sun Yilin withdrew from the carriage. Outside, there were noises again. Jingwan raised her head to look. The light from the skylight dimmed a lot. Presumably, it was already close to evening. She didn't know where it was outside and didn't know where her husband was. However, knowing that he was nearby, her heart settled down. At the same time, the longing that was suppressed in the bottom of her heart also broke out. So much so that the corners of Jingwan's eyes were a little wet. In the end, she didn't let those tears fall down. She reached out to wipe them away and laughed at herself. This person, when she had someone to rely on, she became delicate. The warmth and tenderness, it wasn't only aimed at men, it was actually easier for women to indulge in it. Chapter 568. Jingwon could not determine their approximate location based on the environment alone. However, regardless of whether it was the weather or the overall journey, she could conclude that they were still in Qiyuan. Moreover, they were still far from southern Qi. This was not in line with her initial estimation. Therefore, she was more certain that those people were targeting Li Hongyuan. Jingwon originally thought that they would spend the night here. However, she did not expect that after a short rest, they would continue on their journey. However, they abandoned the carriage and seemed to want to ride horses or walk on foot. Jingwon's horsemanship had improved greatly. Even if the road was rugged, as long as the horse was not galloping, it would not be a problem. Therefore, she rejected Sun Yilin's offer to take her. However, she was about to be 5 months pregnant. Moreover, it was winter and her clothes were much thicker. Therefore, when she got on the horse, she frowned slightly. Blackie was carrying a large bundle that was almost half her height. She stood beside the horse with a worried expression and looked up. "Your Highness, do you want me to take you?" Jingwon shook her head. "No need. I'm fine." Jingwon touched her lower abdomen and said in her heart, "Baby, bear with it. When this matter is over, you should be able to settle down." Jingwon grabbed the reins with both hands and looked coldly. Naturally, she was thinking about more than this. She guessed that it was not only this matter that was happening, but also the capital. During this period of time, if there was no trouble in the capital, Jingwon would doubt their intelligence. In fact, in her opinion, these two matters were complementary. Blackie was worried about Jingwon. No matter what, she would not leave Jingwon's side. Relying on her good health and martial arts, she insisted on leading Jingwon's horse personally. Blackie encountered many difficulties along the way, but she solved most of them in a simple and violent way. She knew that these people would not do anything to the princess, so she did not show any mercy. Later on, when she was surrounded by several people, she showed that she did not care about her life. If they really wanted to do anything to her, she would definitely drag them down with her. In the end, these people could only use silent violence. At the same time, they also had to prevent her from kidnapping Jingwon. Obviously, in their opinion, Jingwon did not come out willingly. She would definitely try to escape if she had the chance. Now that the target was close at hand and the horse was there, they naturally could not let the master and servant be together. For a moment, they were in a deadlock. Enough. Let's get on our way. If anything happens to you people, you can commit suicide to atonement. Perhaps they were indignant in their hearts, but Sun Yilin still had some prestige among these people. Therefore, Blackie led the horse in the middle. The others were either riding or walking around. In short, they did not want to let a fly fly in. Jingwon looked at them and did not comment. She did not take it seriously at all. They basically trotted along the way, but the more they went, the more they went. Even if there were torches all around, they could not tell the direction. In this way, for more than 2 hours, they turned left and right on the road. They did not know where they went. If this continued, Jingwon really could not bear it. "Stop, don't go." As soon as the voice fell, Blackie immediately reined in the horse. It could be said that the order was strictly followed. However, how could the others be happy? For a time, all kinds of unpleasant words came one after another. Jingwon did not take it seriously at all. She held Blackie's hand and directly got off the horse. These people's opinions were never within the scope of her consideration. These days, she also saw clearly that although Sun Yilin was suppressing them on the surface, in fact, there were other reasons why these people did not dare to touch him. As for what it was obvious. She still had great value, and on her husband's side, it was obvious that those people did not succeed at all. Jingwon was not arrogant, but she was quite at ease that she wanted to rest. After that, Sister Hei deftly found a place to tidy up. She untied the big bundle behind her, but it turned out that it was full of thick and warm things. This work was spread out for Jingwon to use. Not only that, she also quickly entered the forest. Not long after, she picked up a lot of dead branches and withered grass and lit a fire. She also took some utensils without asking. First, she made some soup for Jingwan to drink to warm her stomach and body. It was enough to show that Blackie's survival ability in the wild was absolutely excellent. Even if it was the wilderness, because she was well taken care of, Jingwan quickly recovered and looked a little sleepy. During this period, Blackie had already used the existing things in the forest to build a simple hut for Jingwan. Jingwan sighed in her heart. Her own maid could be a wilderness survival expert. The others were not so lucky. They were a group of rough people, and their ability to take care of themselves was limited. It was good enough that they could eat plain water and sleep on the ground. Originally, they could have a good sleep in the latter half of the night. However, because of Jin Qian princess consort's interference, there was nothing left. Their resentment was naturally heavier. However, Blackie scowled and angrily stood guard outside like a cold-faced female yaksha. She looked like she would fight to the death with anyone who caught up. On the other side, in a valley, there was a simple farmhouse. There were about 3 rooms, but they were all brightly lit. Jin Qian Wang Li Hongyuan was in one of the rooms, sitting casually with his eyes closed. He looked cold, and his whole person was cold to the bones. The 2 people next to him were like door gods. Their breathing was very slow. A man in black came in from outside. "Master, Wang Fei has already reached the forest 10 li away." Chapter 569. Li Hongyuan opened his eyes. However, they were as dark as a pool, bottomless. There was no trace of the warmth that he should naturally show when he heard about Jingwan. If Jingwan suddenly stood in front of him, she might think that he had changed. The people around Li Hongyuan were in a state of extreme tension from morning to night. That kind of oppression seemed to be able to suffocate people at any time. Even if their master didn't say or do anything, just a glance from him would make you feel like you were stripped naked and placed in a world of ice and snow. That kind of feeling of being frozen from the inside out would make you lose all ability to think and move, and become a little lamb at the mercy of others. Before their master married Wang Fei, he was also very terrifying. He was ruthless and unpredictable, but at least he made people feel that he was still a human. But now, he really didn't seem like a human, but a true heartless devil. Even if he was terrifying, he was still human. No matter how terrifying a person was, most of the time, he was normal and reasonable. They were shadow guards, men of sacrifice. Everything belonged to their master. When they faced their master, there was no fear. No matter what he did, in their eyes, they could accept it.
It was a normal thing.
But now, it was completely different. They were on the verge of death all the time. It was not a clean death, but a death of torture and fear that made even their souls tremble. There was no time like this when they wished for Wang Fei to be here. However, they were also very worried. Was Wang Fei really suitable to see the current Wang Ye? Even if Wang Fei had an unparalleled position in Wang Ye's heart, even if the whole world added together couldn't compare to her. Wang Fei occupied all of Wang Ye's heart. But what if Wang Ye didn't have a heart? Did that mean that in Wang Ye's eyes, Wang Fei was the same as other people? Wang Fei and Wang Ye were deeply in love. Because nothing major happened, there was no situation where they would accompany each other in life and death. However, they were very clear that if there really was such a time, they would definitely be together until death. It could be seen that if Wang Ye broke off his feelings for Wang Fei, how big of a blow would it be to her? Wang Fei's current situation was special. Under such a big shock, it was possible that, however, they still had hope in their hearts. Even now, the princess consort was special in the prince's heart. His Highness was afflicted with the love-sealing goo, which sealed the master of another female goo that was paired with the love-sealing goo. Under normal circumstances, after being afflicted with such a goo, His Highness would only think of the other goo's master. He would be obedient to her and would be indifferent to everyone else. However, His Highness's current situation was that he treated everyone the same. There was no such special uniqueness. The love-sealing goo was really just a love-sealing goo. The owner of the female goo tried to get close to him, but she almost lost her life. If it wasn't for the fact that the female goo had absolute control over the male goo, if the male goo's owner had any thoughts of harming the female goo, it would immediately bite back. Because of the bite back, that woman escaped from the hands of the prince. However, they couldn't do anything to that woman. Not to mention that the male goo would control its master to protect the female goo, which was even more powerful than the love-sealing goo. It wasn't completely ineffective on its master. It would occasionally work. In addition, it was said that the woman had a type of substitute goo, which was the mother goo. The owner of the child goo would take the outside world's harm on her behalf. The child goo was in the princess consort's body. Although they were skeptical of this theory, after witnessing the strangeness of goo these days, they would rather believe it than not. Therefore, they were in a passive position now. However, they weren't completely passive. At least, they knew about the princess consort situation. They weren't as ignorant as some people thought. It was obvious that His Highness valued and was loyal to the princess consort. Even if he trusted Master Liaochen, it was impossible for him to not have any protection. However, these people were hidden in the dark. On one hand, they were protecting the princess consort, and on the other hand, they were monitoring to find the traitor. Therefore, it was a joke that the news of Jingwan waking up couldn't be spread. Perhaps they couldn't know where Li Hongyuan was, but they had special channels to pass on information. The development of the situation was just a matter of following the trend. What's the situation? His voice was cold, as if he was asking about something ordinary. The person who came in lowered his eyes and gave a simple account of what had happened. He didn't need to look to know his current expression. In the past, if His Highness heard that another man had approached the princess consort with ill intentions, His Highness would definitely fly into a rage and tear him to pieces. But now, there was no reaction at all. It was obvious how abnormal this was. Under normal circumstances, even if a man didn't have feelings for his wife, he would still be possessive and wouldn't tolerate others touching her. Why didn't he have any reaction? Was it because he didn't care at all? If that was the case, His Highness should have ordered the death of the female goo poison's owner. The male goo poison's owner was absolutely loyal to the female goo poison's owner and would protect her without question. But if the female goo poison died, the male goo poison would die with her. This was probably because the woman who created the goo poison wanted a man to have absolute feelings for her and didn't want to drag him down with her because she loved him. As long as he didn't do it himself, everything would be fine. According to His Highness's personality, how could he be willing to be controlled by others? He was only affected by the goo poison's owner's emotions, not his personality. In fact, without the goo poison's shackles, he would only be more unscrupulous. But he didn't. Except for the time when the female goo poison's owner wanted to get close to him, he didn't do anything else. Was he affected by the goo poison, or was he still concerned about the princess consort's safety? Li Hongyuan closed his eyes again. Get ready. We'll settle this tomorrow. Yes, master. Put out the lights and get out. The three of them didn't make a sound. They quietly put out the lights, went out, and closed the door. Li Hongyuan was in the dark. His situation wasn't very good. The goo poison's influence was actually more serious than his subordinates expected. The reason why he was completely cold, like ice, was that he couldn't easily affect his emotions. Once his emotions fluctuated, the goo poison's influence would be aggravated. If it was aggravated, it meant that he might inexplicably have feelings for the female goo poison's owner, which was something Li Hongyuan was very resistant to. He only had his emotions locked, not his memory. Perhaps he couldn't feel his love for Jingwan, but the bits and pieces of his time with Jingwan were very clear memories. If he looked at those memories without emotions, he couldn't be completely indifferent. On the contrary, perhaps because he had his emotions locked, he didn't have any emotions to restrain his abnormal possessiveness. He wanted to lock Jingwan up. Therefore, how could he not care about the person who dared to peep at Jingwan? It was just the first time he lost control of his emotions, and he was almost controlled by the goo poison. Therefore, he had been suppressing himself and suppressing his emotions in all aspects. This was similar to the state when Jingwan fell into a deep sleep. He was extremely tense. That kind of feeling was definitely uncomfortable. If one's willpower wasn't extremely strong, it was absolutely impossible to do it. It should be known that according to the history of the barbarians, the goo poison had been around for thousands of years, and there had never been a precedent to failure. There were many strong-willed bigwigs, but in the end, they couldn't escape from it. It was like an instinct of an irrational beast. Li Hongyuan slept very little at night, even less than before he married Jingwan. Moreover, it was very light. Even if he slept, he was only in a half-awake state. This was because he was in a dream now, and his emotions in the dream were very strong. The suppression was too strong. Li Hongyuan's face was like an iceberg, but under the ice layer, it was like a volcano erupting to the extreme. The ice layer outside was very hard, but in fact, it was also very fragile. Under normal circumstances, it wouldn't break no matter how hard it was knocked. However, if the opportunity was right, it might break with a light tap. What was the result of a volcano eruption? The people were in a terrible situation. Although Jingwan had a good sleeping environment, she didn't sleep very well. In addition to the deliberate noise outside the simple hut, it was also because she always dreamed. The things in the dream were naturally not so wonderful. She had been wandering in a half-asleep state, and people outside could feel her uneasiness. Jingwan finally woke up completely, but she didn't make any noise and didn't intend to get up. In the dark night, even if outsiders couldn't see her, it couldn't change the fact that her eyes were empty and lifeless. The child in her belly suddenly moved. Jingwan came back to her senses and reached out to gently stroke her belly. Li Hongyuan was also uncomfortable. The dream that almost disappeared a few days ago came again at this time, and it came fiercely, with the momentum of monstrous waves, ruthlessly sweeping towards him. The situation in the dream made him unable to wake up for a while. The violent mood fluctuations made the goo poison that was originally quiet move violently, affecting Li Hongyuan's mood. It was simply a vicious cycle. The male goo poison was so obvious. How could the female goo poison not react? If it reacted, how could its master not notice it? As a result, the door of the house at the other end was opened. A beautiful woman, wearing a foreign costume, crossed the threshold gracefully and walked gracefully towards Li Hongyuan's side. However, the woman's walking posture seemed to be somewhat inconsistent with her temperament. Her appearance was obviously bright and flamboyant, and her dress showed enthusiasm, but her posture was restrained and quiet. The woman was blocked outside the door by Li Hongyuan's subordinates, but the woman didn't mind. She raised a shallow smile, and her whole person became lively in an instant. The corners of her eyes were raised, and the red lips were upturned. Even without deliberate seduction, she could make people charming and affectionate. Her whole person was like a burning flame, hot and strong, making people unconsciously sink into it. However, Li Hongyuan's subordinates were like soulless puppets, completely ignoring her. When the woman encountered such a situation for the first time, she might have been angry. How could anyone escape from her beauty and charm? Over and over again, she got used to it. Her whole mind was on Li Hongyuan, a man that even the love-locking goo poison couldn't lock. He was indeed worthy of her attention. The strong desire to conquer made her throw everyone else aside. As far as she knew, the love-locking goo poison had indeed appeared before, but it didn't succeed from the beginning. Therefore, when Li Hongyuan didn't fall in love with her at the first moment, she wasn't surprised. If it really succeeded immediately, she would be disappointed. She liked challenging things. And these days, she didn't give up. On one hand, she used various methods to influence him, and on the other hand, she waited quietly. She originally thought that the best opportunity would be when the Jean Princess consort appeared. To be honest, to let that woman, who seemed to be soaking in a honey pot, watch helplessly as her husband hugged another woman and whispered sweet words to her. That helpless and disbelieving look made people feel exceptionally happy. But she didn't expect this opportunity to be brought forward. But this was also good. Are you sure you want to stop me? Your master isn't in a good condition now. However, The secret guards guarding the door were still indifferent. Even if they didn't completely doubt her words, they didn't intend to move aside. All right, I'll wait here. Anyway, the longer I delay, the higher my chances of success. The woman smiled gently and elegantly, which didn't match that face of hers. Others might feel that her charm was boundless, but those who had a clear mind only felt that it was strange and unpredictable. The female goo that activated the love-locking goo poison continuously influenced the male goo. The male goo's reaction became more and more intense, and Li Hongyuan's suppression on it seemed to be weakening bit by bit. It was like an invisible war. On the other side, Jingwan once again fell into a half-awake state. Dreams came one after another. No matter what kind of dream it was, as the person in the dream, even though the sun was shining brightly, the environment wasn't very clear or bright. However, Jingwan's dream this time was a little unusual. She didn't know where she was. It seemed like she was running for her life. There were people around her, and they were doing their best to protect her. One by one, they died. As for her, even though she was pregnant, she was still skilled in archery and horse riding. However, because she had been running around for a long time, she didn't have a fixed place to stay. She couldn't eat or sleep well, and her body gradually couldn't bear it. She became thinner and thinner. If it wasn't for her good foundation, she might have lost her child long ago. Under such circumstances, the child was born prematurely, and in the end, it was difficult to give birth. In the middle of nowhere, there were only guards around her who didn't know anything about this. She couldn't give birth to the child, and in the end, she chose to cut open her stomach. Jingwan held her stomach. She didn't know when, but fine beads of sweat had appeared on her forehead. Her mouth overflowed with painful moans. She seemed to know that she was dreaming, but she couldn't wake up. Moreover, it was clearly a dream, but she seemed to feel a sharp pain. Mei was guarding outside. How could she not sense anything at this time? She hurriedly opened the small door made of branches. The fire outside was cast in, and Jingwan's happy face was clearly shown. "Your Highness," Sister He panicked. Your Highness, how are you? Where are you feeling unwell? Your Highness, don't scare the servant. Your Highness." Sister He was very regretful, very regretful. Why didn't she learn something in this area? Otherwise, she wouldn't be unable to do anything at this time. How could such a movement not attract attention? Sun Yilin and Fu Rong quickly came over. The worry and anxiety on their faces were not fake. Mei was like a mother hen protecting her calf. They were not allowed to get close at all. Mei, don't be capricious. Now Princess and the child are more important, Fu Rong softly advised. Mei stared at her angrily. She wanted to ask her who she was showing her attitude to. Wasn't she the one who took Princess out of White Dragon Temple? If Princess stayed in White Dragon Temple, how could such a thing happen? However, Mei also knew the severity of the matter at this time, so she didn't argue with them. The simple hut was quickly and carefully opened. Sun Yilin carefully lifted Jingwan's upper body, took out a medicine, and was about to feed it to Jingwan. But he heard a sound. A short arrow was shot from the dark and directly shot through Sun Yilin's hand. The medicine in his hand naturally fell to the ground. Sun Yilin groaned in pain, and then there was a small sound in the forest. Before other people could react, the black shadows in the forest rushed out one after another. Dozens of people quickly controlled the scene. Just by looking at their movements, they knew that they were definitely not ordinary people. In addition to the initial groan, Sun Yilin's other hand was holding Jingwan steadily. He turned a blind eye to the bloody hand and the arrow in his hand. One of the black-clad people went straight to Sun Yilin with an indescribable cold breath. Compared with others, there was no bloody smell. However, the momentum was absolutely not to be underestimated. The footsteps were steady and powerful. When the other party came closer, Sun Yilin saw clearly that it was a woman. Judging from her appearance, she was at most in her early 30s, but it was difficult to judge her age from her behavior. However, the other party seemed to give him an inexplicable sense of familiarity. She quickly took out the medicine and quickly fed it into Jingwan's mouth. During this time, Mei subconsciously tried to stop her, but she couldn't stop her at all. Mei was so anxious that her eyes turned red. In a situation where she had no choice, she could only watch Sun Yilin feed Wang Fei the medicine. At least, she could feel that Sun Yilin wouldn't really hurt Wang Fei. But this unknown person,
Who are you?
what did you feed Wang Fei? If she wasn't firmly suppressed, Mei probably would have hit her directly. Mei, you knew that princess left White Dragon Temple, but you didn't stop her. This crime I will go back and reason with you. This voice couldn't be more familiar. Mei was a little sluggish. Mama? Mama Gong snorted coldly and ignored her. Young master son, please step aside. Along the way, she didn't know how many times she wanted to rush out and chop Sun Yilin directly. In fact, Sun Yilin was not surprised by the appearance of this group of people. Thinking about it, a person like Li Hongyuan could deceive everyone. How could his mind be so meticulous? How could he let them take Princess out of White Dragon Temple so easily? It made sense that there were people secretly protecting her along the way. And it was very likely that he had his own reasons for letting Princess leave White Dragon Temple. And if he really did something to Jingwan along the way, he would probably be dead. Jingwan moved from Sun Yilin's arms to Mama Gong's arms. Mama Gong took Jingwan's pulse and carefully touched her belly and lower body. She could feel that the child was moving, and her lower body was not wet. She was slightly relieved. There should be no blood. However, she couldn't let her sleep like this. Princess consort. She gently tried to wake her up, but it obviously didn't work. Mama Gong was worried that Princess had been poisoned again. Yuan. Jingwan was suddenly trapped in the dream, and her body swayed uneasily. Princess, wake up. Let me take you to His Highness. You will see His Highness soon. Princess Sun Yilin saw this and heard Jingwan call a Yuan again and again. If she didn't love him to the core, she wouldn't be like this. He lowered his eyes and pulled out the arrow in his hand expressionlessly. Then he walked to one side, casually applied some medicine, and tore a piece of white cloth to wrap it. That was all. He glanced at Jingwan, who was still in the dream, and didn't know what she was dreaming about. Some things, even if he didn't want to believe it, were the truth. The others were all detained, but those who resisted were killed directly. Of course, there was no trace of blood left. Anyway, they now knew the specific location of their master, and these people were worthless. As for Sun Yilin, he didn't do anything to him, not knowing whether it was because of his cleverness or other reasons. Outside Li Hongyuan's room, the woman in a foreign dress smiled brighter and brighter. She was so happy that she was about to seize the fruit of victory, and the bell in her hand was ringing. At a certain moment, her smile widened again. She thought to herself, "It's done." However, in an instant her smile froze on her face. Wan, Li Hongyuan's voice suddenly sounded in the room. The people outside, whether it was the woman or Li Hongyuan's subordinates, were all in disbelief. The woman spat out a mouthful of blood. Her body swayed slightly, and she almost fell to the ground. She couldn't believe that she had succeeded, but the male parasite was completely suppressed. Not only that, the male parasite almost died, which affected the female parasite in her body and caused her to be injured. The female parasite wanted the male parasite's absolute loyalty and love, but she gave the male parasite her own life. That's right, if the female parasite died, the male parasite was unaffected. On the other hand, if the male parasite died, the female parasite died. As for the latter, they didn't know what had happened to make their master let out such a miserable and desperate cry. Granny Gong worked tirelessly, and Jingwan suddenly woke up. Her eyes were filled with extreme pain, and tears fell from the corners of her eyes drop by drop. Jingwan didn't recover for a long time. Princess consort. Granny Gong was very worried. Chapter 570. Jingwan raised her head mechanically and looked at the familiar yet strange face in front of her. She then recognized who it was. "Nanny, I heard Yuan calling me." Her tears were still falling drop by drop. Nanny Gong didn't know what she dreamed of that made her so sad. It made one's heart ache. Don't be sad, princess. We will see His Highness soon. After a long while, Jingwon finally recovered. She wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes and calmed down. However, even if she took the pregnancy medicine, the effect was not so fast. She still felt a little uncomfortable now, so she still leaned on Nanny Gong and didn't move. She stroked her belly from time to time. As she slowly recalled the dream, she suspected that it might not have been a simple dream. Regarding her husband's past life, even though he did not explain it to her in detail and only mentioned it vaguely, she seemed to be able to make some connections now. Perhaps it was something that he had experienced in his past life. It might be a little absurd to think like this, but Jingwon felt that it was the truth. It was the truth. She could feel the pain and sadness in such a tragic end in the dream. What about the person who experienced it bit by bit? This was not the most important thing. Even if she died tragically, she was still dead. The person who was really suffering was the one who was alive. Her family didn't know what happened, so it might be better. But what about him? Jingwon didn't dare to imagine how she survived that period of time. If it were her, she might have completely collapsed, let alone become the emperor and create a prosperous dynasty. At that time, she might not have understood his deep feelings. She didn't know what he had experienced after her death. But from her point of view now, it was a very cruel thing to entrust the child to him and ask him to take care of the child. What was left could be a spiritual sustenance, or the real culprit who opened the scars again and again. Tears unconsciously rolled in her eyes again. "Your Highness," Mama Gong called out worriedly. At this time, even though Nanny Gong was dressed in black, she was not the fierce female protector. Instead, she had been by Jingwon's side for a long time. Even though she was strict and proper, her aura was gentle. No matter how one looked at her, she did not look like a decisive person. "I'm fine." Jingwon rubbed her eyes and held back her tears. "Mama, let's go find His Highness now." She couldn't wait any longer. She couldn't suppress her longing for him anymore. At this moment, it completely exploded. She wanted to see him. Every cell in her body was clamoring to see him. She wanted 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 to see him. Okay, let's go now. At this time, naturally, whatever Jingwon said was the truth. No one had the heart to go against her wishes. However, Jingwon's condition didn't seem to have recovered completely. Under such circumstances, there was still a huge risk for her to go on the road. They had to take care of her emotions, but they couldn't ignore her health. For a moment, they were in a dilemma. When Mama Gong gently stroked her belly, Jingwon realized that what she needed now was rest. She unconsciously clenched her fists. In the end, she suppressed the intense longing again. This might be the only child between her and Ayuan. If it was gone, there probably wouldn't be another one in the future. "Mama, do you have anything on you that can calm me down?" Rest for another 2 hours. It was good that Jingwon could control her emotions. "Yes, Your Highness. Rest assured. When it's time, I'll call you." Jingwon nodded, closed her eyes, and tried to empty her mind as much as possible. It was not an easy thing to do. However, as the saying goes, a mother is strong. When there was no one to rely on, she would be tenacious and have extraordinary perseverance. Li Hongyuan knew the Luo Jingwon best in his previous life. No matter how she changed on the outside, she never changed on the inside. Under the effect of the calming incense, Jingwon fell into a deep sleep. This time, she didn't have any dreams. It seemed that she slept very well. During this process, Mama Gong had been paying attention to Jingwon's situation. Fortunately, she had gradually stabilized. Mama Gong put her hand on Jingwon's belly. "Good child, now you know how to care for your mother." As if in response to her words, she felt a slight squirming under her belly. This time, Nurse Gong smiled very sincerely. Regardless of whether it was the little heir or the little Canton princess, he would be the most outstanding and filial child. When 2 hours were up, they confirmed that Jingwon had almost recovered. Although she was still far from her peak state, it was not something that could be recovered in a short time. She needed a quiet and stable environment to recuperate slowly. Obviously, such conditions did not exist now. It was better to settle the matter as soon as possible and return to the capital. When Jingwon woke up, she found that during this period of time, they had made a sedan chair. Although it looked simple, it was as delicate as possible. It was cushioned with a thick and soft blanket, so there was no need to worry about its warmth or comfort. Mama Gong did not let Jingwon get up. She directly carried Jingwon and put her on the sedan chair. After tucking in the corner of the blanket, Mama Gong made a silent gesture. People came forward and lifted the sedan chair. Then, the surrounding scenery began to recede. The speed of receding was quite fast. However, Jingwon did not feel the slightest bump. As for Mama Gong, she was by her side and remained relatively still. She didn't even move up or down. It was obvious that the 4 sedan bearers were walking at the same pace. She was also walking at the same pace as them. Seeing this, Jingwon's heart relaxed a little. With these people around, it meant that her husband had already made arrangements. In that case, his own safety shouldn't be a problem. Your Highness, we are going a little too fast now. You may feel dizzy.
Take a rest.
Soon, we will see His Highness. Mama Gong said softly. Okay. She could feel that things might have really reached the most critical stage. Now, there was no point in thinking too much. Things should be as they were, one step at a time. Thinking about things before reaching that stage seemed to be of no use other than wasting her mind. And right now, the taboo thing for her was probably worrying. As for Sun Yilin, Jingwon did not want to think about it anymore. It did not matter whether he had a reason or not. Some things were done. After all, Jingwon had already thought it through. Even if her husband wanted to kill her, she would not frown, let alone now. Therefore, no matter what his ending was, she would accept it. No, it had nothing to do with her. When the time came, the only thing she could do was to hide his actions and not let him implicate Sun Yijia. Sun Yijia was her sister-in-law, her best friend, and the mother of her nephew and niece. Sun Yijia did not know anything about Sun Yilin. She was living a good life now. She should not be implicated by Sun Yilin. Even though in this feudal dynasty there were many cases of guilt by association, Jingwon was at most half a native of Qiyuan. As long as she had the memory of her previous life, she could not be completely assimilated into this society. In her previous life, no matter how heinous the crime was, there was no mention of the family members being implicated. However, if the matter was too serious, Jingwon would not be able to bear no grudges against her sister-in-law like before. After all, when she saw her, she would inevitably think of Sun Yilin. Not being implicated did not mean that she would not vent her anger. She was not a saint. She was not close to Sun Yijia, but she was not closer to her husband. Sometimes it was already the limit to be able to control her emotions and not vent it on the innocent. Therefore, she could only hope that things would not be too bad. Jingwon inadvertently looked up at the sky. It seemed that the sky was about to brighten. It seemed that tonight was much faster than she thought. Li Hongyuan's current situation was not good. He was trapped in the dream. Once again, he clearly experienced the darkest and most painful period. Did he and Jingwon enter the same dream, or was it a coincidence that they had the same dream at the same time? However, now no one could get close to him. Although he was still leaning against the wall with his eyes closed without any movement, and even his breathing was very weak, his attack power was actually very terrifying. It was as if he had lost his mind. He attacked indiscriminately. Whoever got close to him would die. Even if Gong Jio wanted to help him, there was nothing he could do. Therefore, he could only watch helplessly. As for the woman, she had already been thrown far away by the people around Li Hongyuan. Although their actions were gentle because of a substitute gu, it was also a fact that she was thrown away. A woman being treated like this was as embarrassing as it could be. Unfortunately, even though Li Hongyuan was currently being controlled, anyone by his side could not be underestimated. Furthermore, this was the Qiyuan region. Even if it was an unknown, desolate mountain or forest, it was still Li Hongyuan's territory. Even if the other party had an absolute advantage in terms of numbers, they would not dare to easily do anything to this group of killing gods. Thus, after that woman was injured and embarrassed, she was so angry that her face turned ashen and she gnashed her teeth. In the end, she could only forcefully endure it. Naturally, the determination and hatred in her eyes became even more obvious and intimidating. Li Hongyuan's secret guards saw that this woman was not so simple. Looking at her, she might even have a grudge against their master. Moreover, her obsession seemed to be a little too deep. This was even more strange. However, they were very clear that they had never seen such a woman around their master. This could only mean that her face did not belong to her. Or, she had a very close relationship with someone who had a deep relationship with their master. Perhaps there would be an answer to these questions soon. Even if there was no answer, it did not matter. No matter if it was love or hatred, it was all settled. It was not a big deal. Who would care about who she was? The woman returned to her room and smashed everything in the room. Her anger seemed to have distorted her whole face. However, as she smashed, she suddenly stopped. She felt a burning pain on her face. Then, her face suddenly oozed blood and seemed to be eroding little by little. She covered her face with her hands in horror and hurriedly put on her gauze hat. Guards, guards, bring a sacrifice from the dungeon. Hurry, hurry. She was furious and anxious. A woman's voice came from outside. However, it was not the official language of Qiyuan. It did not seem to be a common local language in Qiyuan. It should be a more minority language. It might not even exist in Qiyuan. Soon, there was a noise outside. A beautiful girl, who looked to be at most 13 or 14 years old, was dragged in by two women who were also wearing alien costumes. They threw her to the ground rudely. The girl probably knew what was going to happen to her. From her eyes to her expression, she was full of deep fear. However, she could not speak. She could only make whimpering sounds from her throat. She knelt on the ground and kowtowed. Even if she could not speak, it was obvious that she was begging for mercy. The woman bent down. Ko Dan's hand, which was as red as blood, pinched the girl's chin. However, that hand, which should have been smooth, delicate, and beautiful, now looked like it had shrunk. Blue veins bulged out. Her skin was dry and dull, and there were slight wrinkles. It's your honor to be my sacrifice. But you don't have to be so excited. The woman's other hand was gently caressing the girl's face. You're really beautiful. However, you're also really annoying. It was as if she was whispering to her lover. However, the woman's fingernails scratched the girl's face. From light red marks to bloody marks, the girl's eyes were filled with fear and pain. Perhaps it was because of the deep fear that she could not move, but her body was trembling uncontrollably. Perhaps it was because of the sweet blood on the girl's face, but the woman's arms suddenly moved. Gradually, on the inner side of her wrist, a large bulge appeared. Her skin was pushed open, and it even seemed a little translucent. When it was pushed to a certain extent, it broke open with a bang. A dark mass of something crawled out from inside. Upon closer inspection, it looked like a spider covered in fine fur. And because the girl's line of sight was the closest, she seemed to vaguely see a human face on the spider. She was originally just an ordinary peasant girl. Because her family was relatively wealthy, she had always been pampered. She was innocent and naive. One day, she was deceived and kidnapped. Soon, she knew the fate that she might face. Because she had seen it more than once in front of her. She had been terrified all day, hoping that she could be rescued, until this moment, the last desire to live made her struggle with all her might. She suddenly exerted force. The hand that was pinching the girl's chin directly cut through her skin. Blood flowed out, causing the spider to become even more restless. And, because of the other party's resistance, the woman became angry. She grabbed the girl's hair and directly stuffed the spider into the girl's mouth. I gave you face, but you don't want it. The girl was still struggling. However, the struggle now was perhaps not just for the sake of survival. However, the skin of the woman who was separated from the spider became worse and worse. If it was only a young woman, then a middle-aged woman, then perhaps she had already become an old woman. It was just that no one could see her face, so no one knew how terrifying she had become. However, because of that change, the woman became more and more irritable. The young life under her hand became the target of her venting. She pinched and kicked like a crazy woman, and the girl gradually stopped struggling. She aged visibly until she looked like she was 70 or 80 years old. And finally, the woman released her hand in disgust. The old girl, who only had one last breath left, fell to the ground. Then, a bright red spider crawled out from her collar. Compared to the black spider from before, it was more than a size bigger. Following the woman's extended hand, it crawled back into her body. The wound on her wrist instantly disappeared without a trace. And the originally aged skin also became smooth and elastic again. Her hand was also slender and jade-like fingers. During the entire process, the woman seemed as if she had eaten a celestial medicine. She let out sighs that could cause one's bones to soften. And the evil aura on her body also disappeared without a trace because she had recovered her youthful beauty. She took off her veil and smiled. She was still that peerless beauty that could cause one's soul to turn upside down. Without needing her to say anything, the girl, on the ground, was dragged out like filth. "Get ready, I want to take a bath," the woman said with a bit of laziness. And the two women serving by the side narrowed their eyes. "Saintess, do you want to take a normal bath, or do I even need to say this kind of thing? What use do I have for you?" The laziness instantly turned sharp. "Saintess, please forgive us. We will go and prepare for the saintess." The two begged for forgiveness in fear, then hurriedly left, afraid that the saintess would use them to feed the beauty goo if they were a step late. Beauty goo, as the name implied, could make an ugly person beautiful and could also make a person maintain their youthful beauty. However, from the actions of that so-called saintess earlier, it could be seen how cruel the method to maintain one's beauty was. For the beauty goo to be effective, it needed to be fed with young and beautiful women, and those unmarried beautiful women were the best choice. The more beautiful the sacrifice was, the longer the user could maintain their beauty. However, no matter how beautiful the sacrifice was, it would only be effective for a month at most. After the effect was over, the user would have to eat more sacrifices. However, as the number of sacrifices increased, the effect would gradually weaken. And as the user's age increased, the effect would also weaken. In the end, a life might only last for 2 or 3 days or even 2 or 3 lives at a time. It was enough to show how vicious this beauty goo was. And those who used the beauty goo to maintain their beauty had already surpassed the category of humans. They were worse than beasts. And this saintess was actually not very old, only in her 20s. One sacrifice could maintain her beauty for a month, but she still wanted to use the blood bath. Blood bath naturally used blood, and the source of the blood was the same as the sacrifice. However, how much blood could a person have, and how many lives would be sacrificed in one blood bath? Although the effect of the blood bath was to maintain one's beauty, at the beginning of using the beauty goo, it could only be used as icing on the cake. Correspondingly, because the beauty goo was raised too well, the beauty goo would become greedy and want to eat more sacrifices, and eat more frequently. This so-called saintess, when did she have the sudden urge to use a blood bath? Such a person, words like snake, scorpion, and beast were no longer enough to describe her. A bathtub was quickly carried in. Then, when she saw the amount of blood in the bathtub, the saintess was furious. Why is there so little blood? In fact, it was already quite a lot. If she sat in the bathtub, it would reach her lower abdomen. "Saintess, please forgive us. There are no more sacrifices in the dungeon. This place is remote, and there is no one around. The sacrifices were all found from other places. Because of the recent arrests, the Chiyuan authorities have been paying attention to the nearby places. Shut up, I don't want to listen to your explanations. No matter what method you use, continue to get me more sacrifices. Now, it's time for you to sacrifice yourselves," the saintess said coldly. The two women's eyes were filled with deep fear, and their bodies trembled slightly. However, they did not panic and quickly knelt down. It's our honor to sacrifice ourselves for the saintess. However, there are no other sisters around now. When the time comes, who will serve the saintess? The saintess knew that they were just making excuses, but it was the truth. She needed someone to serve her. I'll forgive you for now. Go and get some water to add to the bathtub. How am I supposed to bathe with so little blood? The effect of the blood would definitely be weakened if it was added to the bathtub. This made the saintess very unhappy. However, it was better than nothing. Thus, after she was ready, she submerged herself in. After a while, she slowly raised her head. Her face was covered in blood. It was disgusting no matter how one looked at it, but she enjoyed it. Perhaps it was the effect of the beauty parasite, but the blood gradually faded. In the end, it became clear water. The saintess stood up from the bathtub. She looked rosy and lustrous. Her skin was even better than the best silk. She used the softest cloth to dry it bit by bit. Standing in front of the mirror, she carefully observed her body inch by inch. It was as if she was looking at the most perfect piece of art. Narcissism might not be a big deal, but narcissism to a certain extent was no different from a pervert. However, it was already winter, and there was definitely no heat in this thatched hut in the wilderness. Was she not afraid of the cold? The cold might be tolerable, but the changes in the body could not be eliminated just by tolerating it. However, this saintess was dressed very lightly before. Even those who practiced martial arts all year round had thicker clothes than her, but there was no change in her body. This was very abnormal. After using the blood to nourish her body, the injuries caused by the emotion-sealing parasite seemed to have disappeared. Chapter 571. After admiring his body, a deep darkness appeared in her eyes. She licked her blood-red lips and said, "Should I say, you are indeed the man that I have taken a fancy to. Even at this point, you can still survive. Heh, things are getting more and more interesting." She turned around and wanted to see her prey again. Even if she couldn't get close, the closer she got, the stronger the connection between the love-locking parasites would be. Of course, the love-locking parasites couldn't be more than 10 miles away from each other. The farther they were, the more irritable the parasites would be. Correspondingly, the master would also feel very uncomfortable. What's going on? I can't sense anything at all. It's impossible. How could this happen? The holy maiden frowned. Things seemed to be a little out of her expectations. She was originally very sure of this, but now she couldn't help but have a trace of doubt. In fact, from the beginning, some of the feelings that should have been pleasurable were not so penetrating. How should she put it? It was like the meridians all over her body. They should have been unobstructed, but some subtle places seemed to be blocked. She didn't know where exactly the blockage was. She ignored it because she couldn't find it, but now this feeling became stronger again. He had spent a lot of time and energy, but things didn't develop as expected. This was already annoying. If things went out of control, then it was even more intolerable. She took the risk again to get close to Li Hongyuan's house, but she was also mercilessly blocked. The holy maiden didn't advance rashly, but she also didn't retreat. At this moment, it seemed that everyone was immobilized. They were motionless in their original positions. The sky was getting brighter. "Come in." In the house, Li Hongyuan finally spoke. As soon as he spoke, the world seemed to come alive. Even the holy maiden felt the existence of the male parasite in his body. In terms of perception, it wasn't that she didn't gain anything. At least, the male parasite's control over him seemed to have increased. So, she must have thought too much before? Master. The person at the door hurried in. Prepare water for a bath. Previously, he was not much different from being pulled out of the water. After sitting for so long, his wet clothes seemed to have dried a lot. It was quite uncomfortable to stick to his body. Moreover, he was a bit of a neat freak. Li Hongyuan's bathing process was neither fast nor slow. It was quite normal. The only abnormal thing was that Gong Jiu was serving him. However, since Eunuch Mu was not around, it seemed that anyone could serve him. Stepping out of the door, He welcomed the faint light of dawn. He was incomparably handsome and spirited. Perhaps because he was emotionless, he didn't seem to have the slightest bit of mortal aura. He was more and more like a god from the 9 heavens. When facing him, one only wanted to submit. He tilted his head and looked at the so-called saintess. Because of the emotion-sealing goo, they were supposed to be the closest people to each other. But now, he was looking at her as if she was nothing. She herself was not so relaxed. No matter how proud and conceited she was, she could not help but tremble. Her legs went soft. If she did not grit her teeth and hold on, she might have made a fool of herself on the spot. It was as if he didn't take the other parties seriously at all. For some people, what was even more intolerable than contempt was disregard, and this saintess was one of them. The trembling of his body became more and more obvious. This time it was due to anger. Tell the servants to prepare a meal for the princess. He had no feelings for her, but he still kept thinking about her. This made the saintess heart burn with pain. Jealousy was about to drown her. However, no matter how turbulent her emotions were, they could not affect Li Hongyuan. Although her emotions actually affected the emotion-sealing goo in his body, what could she do? No matter how unwilling she was, there was nothing she could do. After coming to her senses, she suddenly realized that the Luo Jingwan was coming. She knew it clearly, but how did Li Hongyuan know it? Logically speaking, he should know. It was a surprise she prepared for him. Now, looking at the people around him, she found that they were not surprised at all. They looked calm, which showed that they had known the news for a long time. So, things were really beyond her expectation? Damn it. Calm down, calm down. Even if it was beyond her expectation, Luo Jingwan still had the substitute goo in his body. Therefore, even if things were not so perfect, she still had the initiative. They could not touch her. On the contrary, they had to protect her well. As long as she was alive, there would always be a chance to turn the tables. She had endured it time and time again. Back then, when she was in the most pain, she had endured it. So, what if she endured it now? The meal was ready. Li Hongyuan also ate some. Compared to before, he ate more. Li Hongyuan put down his chopsticks and slowly wiped his hands with a handkerchief. He looked as if he had completely recovered his former elegance. There were no negative emotions, and he was no longer as cold as before. When the princess arrives, serve her the meal well. Then come to the back to find me. Yes. It was so normal that it was abnormal. During this period of time, he had been abnormal. Suddenly, he became normal. That was abnormal. Since the princess was here, and she was still attentive and considerate, what was wrong with staying and waiting? Was it because they had no feelings for each other? Taking care of her was their former friendship, but he could not accompany her everywhere like before. In fact, Jingwan and the others were already outside the colonel. But because they did not know the situation inside, they did not act rashly for the time being. And the people outside had basically been dealt with. When they were discussing how to contact Li Hongyuan, the person in the call came out. It was the leader of the guards. Greetings, Your Highness. Normally, Jingwan's heart should have calmed down a little after seeing him. However, for some reason, her heart was beating a little faster. It wasn't because of nervousness or excitement. It felt more like a bad feeling. Where is your prince? Is he okay now? This was the thing that worried Jingwan the most. As for the others, Your Highness, His Highness is fine. His Highness had ordered the servants to prepare breakfast.
He was just waiting for you.
Jingwan unconsciously clenched her fists. If so, he should have come to see her in person. But he did not. What is the situation? Tell me clearly. Don't hide anything. Actually, Guard Qian was not clear about his master's condition. So he said whatever he wanted to say. Except for the substitute goo, he did not hide anything. The reason why he hid the substitute goo was that he did not want her to feel burdened. But he did not expect that Jingwan actually knew. Emotion-locking goo. Damn it, Jingwan really did not hate those worms as much as she did at this moment. But he could resist such a domineering and strange thing. Jingwan felt warm and distressed. She knew that it was not easy to resist something that had never failed. Did he have no feelings for her anymore? Although Jingwan was a little sad, but it did not matter.
It could be solved.
Moreover, if a sincere relationship could be easily swayed by a worm, it would be too childish. If it could be swayed by external things, it could only mean that it was not real enough, not deep enough. She believed in him. Jingwan loosened her clenched fists and lightly exhaled. Then let's go in. She wanted to see who was coveting her husband. Jingwan's reaction was out of guard Qian's expectation. But after thinking carefully, it seemed that it was understandable. Their feelings were sincere, and their trust for each other was incomparable. With guard Qian leading the way, the journey was smooth and unobstructed. But it was someone who thought of ways to bring her here. There was really no reason to stop her. Moreover, the initiative was in their hands. Perhaps they did not even care whose hands she was in now. There was nothing special about the colonel basically. It was obvious at a glance. Why did the other party choose such a place? Jingwan did not believe that there was no reason. Jingwan originally thought that her husband, even if he did not go out to pick her up, should be the first to see her after she came in. But now, there was not even a shadow of him. And the person who carried the female goo of the emotion-locking spell was also not seen. However, according to Jingwan's estimation, the female goo of the substitute goo in her body should also be with that woman. Because only in this way, many things would make sense. Regarding this point, guard Qian hid it from her, and she did not intend to ask. After entering the room and seeing the food on the table, Jingwan still did not see the person she wanted to see most. The bad feeling intensified again. Where is your prince? Where is he now? It was reasonable that he did not go to pick her up. But how could he explain, avoiding ? Princess, Prince is at the back of the room. You can eat first. I will take you there later. There's no need. I'll see him first. This person was just inches away. If he didn't see him, how could he eat? Princess, when Jingwan turned around, guard Qian reached out to stop her. Please forgive me, Princess. Prince asked me to invite you to eat first. Don't worry, Prince will be waiting. Even if you don't think for yourself, you should think about the child in your belly. Jingwan looked at him. Even if she had to eat regularly, now it was just a short time. If he insisted that she eat before going, then there might be a reason why she could not eat after seeing him. Guard Qian felt his scalp tingle under Jingwan's gaze, but he was still determined not to give in. Jingwan did not make things difficult for him. She sat down and began to eat. She waved her hand and did not ask Nanny Gong to serve her. It was just a small square table, and she was alone. There was no need to ask others to serve her. It was not as exquisite as the food in the prince's mansion, and it was not as delicious. However, to Jingwan now, everything she ate was the same. It tasted like wax, but she still ate as much as she could. She did not want to think so much about the why. Anyway, she would know in a while, right? However, as she ate, the tears in Jingwan's eyes rolled down her cheeks. She didn't seem to notice it and continued to stuff food into her mouth. She clearly didn't swallow the food in her mouth. She clearly had good dining etiquette, but now she didn't seem to care about her image and was in a sorry state. Princess, Princess. Nanny Gong called out, trying to stop her. It was better not to eat at all. However, Jingwan did not seem to hear her. Her movements were mechanical. When she tried to swallow, she could not swallow and spit it out. Wang Fei, Mama Gong hurriedly supported her. She took the chopsticks in her hand and patted her back. If you can't eat, then don't eat. Later, Wang Ye will accompany you to eat. Mama Gong really wanted to ask, why was Wang Ye avoiding her? Being stared at by the female guard Qian was under a lot of pressure. He also wanted to know why. Nanny, I don't want to cry, really, but I can't control it. Sometimes, people's grievances came so inexplicably. No matter how much she tried to prepare herself, it was useless. It's okay, it's okay. A woman is pregnant, and her emotions are changeable. She can do whatever she wants. Granny Gong had been by Jingwan's side for so many years, but she had never seen her so fragile. In the past 2 days, she had shed more tears than she had in the past. Madame Luo had said that her princess consort had never cried much when she was young. She was probably the child who cried the least in the world. Now, she wasn't hysterical and there wasn't much emotion in her eyes, but it was enough to break anyone's heart. After vomiting, she rinsed her mouth and wiped her face. After crying, she seemed to have cried all her emotions away. Jingwan sat upright and looked at Guard Qian. "I've eaten." Before Guard Qian could react, Nanny Gong's knife-like gaze had already turned to him. "Hurry up and lead the way." Guard Qian felt a little wronged. He did not say that he would not lead the way. Unfortunately, he could only think about it in his heart and did not dare to talk back. Not to mention Nanny Gong. Even he could not bear to see the princess in this state. Behind the hut, there was a relatively flat piece of land with 2 trees. Li Hongyuan was sitting under one of the trees. In front of him was a small table with a zither on it. However, what was unbelievable was that the saintess was leaning on him as if she had no bones. The back window of the hut was actually open, but it was not closed. What happened inside, not to mention Li Hongyuan. Even the saintess heard it. In her eyes, Li Hongyuan looked indifferent on the surface, but his clenched fists, the bulging veins on the back of his hands, and the restless male venomous insect in his body all showed that he was not calm at all. Even in this state, he could still have a reaction. The feelings between them were indeed so deep that it was unbelievable. Was this really the living king of hell in the past? It was obvious that everyone revolved around him, but he gave his heart completely to a woman. This was something that she did not dare to hope for in the past. Although some things were just guesses, the facts proved that her guesses were right. His control over the male venomous insect had increased a little. Yes, it was really something to be happy about. As expected, the opportunity came when our Jean princess consort appeared. However, when others were in pain, she was happy. With a happy mood, she curled up a strand of Li Hongyuan's hair and brushed it gently beside his ear. He was the one who pulled her to his side. She could not even be within 3 steps of him for such a long time, but he took the initiative to reach out to her. Who would believe that there was nothing fishy about it? However, this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Even if she knew that he had an ulterior motive, she could not let it go. Li Hongyuan loosened his fist and began to play the zither. Even if he wanted to tear the woman lying on his shoulder into pieces, he resisted the urge to kick her away. Moreover, the influence of the emotion-locking goo on him was getting stronger, but he did not want to do anything. Perhaps it was because of the emotion-locking he did not feel any heartache. However, there was still a very uncomfortable feeling. Perhaps it was even more uncomfortable than direct heartache. Bypassing the thatched hut, Jingwan stopped the moment she saw her husband. The people around her were shocked and could not believe it. They were even furious. Even if it was their master, their anger could not be quelled. If he had been controlled by the emotion-locking goo from the beginning, perhaps he would not be so angry. However, after so long, they knew that their master was indeed invincible. At this time, when the princess consort appeared, he gave them a head-on blow, making them dizzy and their brains buzzing. How could they not be angry? On the other hand, Jingwan seemed to be very calm. At least on the surface, no emotions could be seen. On the contrary, a certain holy maiden who was prepared to watch a good show was very disappointed. Clearly, she did not even have the appetite to eat because she did not see the princess consort. She was like a daughter flower, which made people very disdainful. Now, she was so calm that it was frightening. Not to mention breaking down, her posture was still natural and upright. It was as if she would not move no matter how fierce the storm was. In such a short time, it was as if she had become a completely different person. It was really puzzling. Li Hongyuan also stopped playing the zither and met Jingwan's gaze without any ripples. The princess consort is here. Then, as if nothing had happened, he moved his gaze away and fell on the holy maiden beside him. He even reached out and touched the bell bracelet on her wrist. Jingwan lifted her feet and slowly walked over. She stood a few steps away from Li Hongyuan. "Your Highness, do you still remember what you said before?" Jingwan said calmly. She raised her right hand and touched the cuff of her left hand. I have said many things. Your Highness, what are you referring to? Li Hongyuan looked at her carelessly. Perhaps because he did not have feelings for her for the time being, Li Hongyuan could not see Jingwan's true feelings now. However, his intuition told him that his wife was very strange now. However, this was exactly what he wanted. Jingwan slightly tilted her head and smiled. Then, I will use practical actions to tell your Highness. Her smile did not fade. Step by step, she approached Li Hongyuan. When she was behind him, she reached out and touched his neck gently with her fingertips. Her right hand suddenly pulled up the sleeve of her left hand and pulled out the dagger tied to her arm. She raised it and stabbed Li Hongyuan's heart. You said that my sincerity could be exchanged for your life. As long as you change your mind, I can take your life. Jingwan said softly, as if she was whispering the most intimate words to him when they were intimate. Things happened too quickly, in the blink of an eye. Probably no one would have thought that Jingwan would be so ruthless. She did not give anyone time to react at all. For a moment, everyone was scared silly. Even a certain holy maiden, who was still lying on Li Hongyuan's shoulder and blocking Jingwan's arm, widened her eyes. She did not even react to the change of the emotion-locking spell in her body. Jingwan did not stop at all. She pulled out the dagger and stabbed it into the back of the neck of the person under her elbow. Originally, this holy maiden was wearing clothes full of silver ornaments. Jingwan was determined to take her life. Her eyes were very accurate, and her hand was very steady. Just from the side of her neck, the dagger, which could cut iron as if it was mud, directly cut off her aorta. Blood instantly gushed out like a fountain. The holy maiden tilted her head in disbelief and looked at Jingwan. Her eyes were filled with disbelief. Then she fell to the ground just like that. Her eyes were still fixed on Jingwan. Soon, a large pool of blood flowed out from her body. However, although the blood of ordinary people had a fishy smell, her blood had a faint stench. Jingwan held the dagger. Blood dripped from the tip of the dagger. She lowered her eyes and looked at the holy maiden emotionlessly. Coveting my man is a crime worthy of death. Finally, the holy maiden breathed her last. But her eyes were still wide open. Obviously, she died with grievances. In the end, what she felt the most was unwillingness and disbelief. Her short life had been filled with extreme humiliation and ups and downs. She had always believed that she would be able to fight to the end, that she would be the final winner. However, she had been caught off guard and died. She had died. She died in the hands of the most unlikely person. Li Hongyuan sat still. Whether it was because of the death of the holy maiden, the male parasite had lost its effect, or because his feelings were recovering bit by bit in his heart. It was painful, very painful. It was not because of Jingwan's stab, but because he had hurt the person he loved the most. What had already happened, he did not want to pursue it. He reached out and held Jingwan's hand that was still on his shoulder. Jingwan did not resist. It was as if this was still the person closest to her. However, she just stood there. How abnormal was that? Others did not know, but Li Hongyuan felt it the clearest. He got up so quickly that he overturned the zither table in front of him. He turned around and held Jingwan's neck with one hand and her waist with the other. He kissed her fiercely. It was raging and crazy. His mouth kept calling out, "Wan Wan." Jingwan still did not respond. It was as if she had given her husband a blow. After killing her love rival, she also lost her vitality. "Wan Wan, please. Wan Wan, can you answer me? I beg you, please don't be like this. I can explain, really I can explain. Otherwise, why don't you stab me again? Once is enough. I beg you, please don't let me lose it a second time, Wan." It was said that men did not cry easily. It was only because they had not been deeply hurt. Chapter 572. Who would have thought that things would turn out this way? Who would have the time to resent Li Hongyuan? He was still bleeding. He had seen with his own eyes that Jingwan had stabbed the dagger into his heart. Who knew how serious his injury was? They only thought that it was hard to tell because of the dark color of his clothes. But now, he was hugging Jingwan and refusing to let go. He did not seem to care about his injury at all. If this went on, even if his injury was not serious, he might still lose his life. That was a situation no one wanted to see. Your Highness, please treat your injury first. One after another, they tried to persuade him. However, Li Hongyuan only had eyes for Jingwan. It seemed that his life was not as important as Jingwan's forgiveness. Since they couldn't persuade Li Hongyuan, they could only start with Jingwan. At this time, they were willing to believe that there was a reason behind it. Besides Li Hongyuan himself, Gong Jiu was the one who knew the most about the whole thing. Gong Jiu knelt on one knee. Your Highness, His Highness had no choice but to do this because of the special way to remove the emotion sealing spell. Please believe that His Highness only cares about you from the beginning to the end. Whether it is himself or external factors, he has never let you down. He didn't know if Jingwan really listened to his words or because she tasted Li Hongyuan's tears, but she finally reacted. Her empty eyes refocused, the dagger in her hand fell, and her body trembled involuntarily. Wan. His kiss became gentle and fell on her lips again and again. Treat your injury first. Jingwan's voice was a little hoarse and trembling. Wan, are you really so heartless that you won't forgive me? You're not even willing to hug me? If that's the case, I'd rather die in your hands. She knew that half of his words were true, and the other half was a trick. She couldn't do anything to him. She compromised and followed his wishes. You win. Hurry up and treat your injury. Or, do you really want to leave me alone in this world? Li Hongyuan, let me tell you, without you, I can still live well. Jingwan hugged him tightly and listened to his heartbeat. But this time, there was no sense of security. She only felt frightened, as if she could hear the sound of blood flowing. Jingwan hurriedly let go of him and tore off his clothes. Gong Jiu, hurry up. Gong Jiu got up and quickly applied acupuncture to stop Li Hongyuan's bleeding. He didn't have a medicine box with him, but he had the best medicine with him. It looked like he was prepared. Li Hongyuan had been holding Jingwan's hand all along, as if he was afraid that she would disappear if he let go. Even if he had sealed his feelings, this person was more important to him than his life. Jingwan looked at him blankly, but she didn't look at him. Instead, she looked at Gong Jiu's movements. Was he already prepared to take the hit? Was that why he deliberately provoked her? The moment she saw Li Hongyuan, her whole person seemed to be divided. She was at two extremes. She was surprisingly calm, but also completely lost her mind. It could even be said that she was crazy. It seemed like she was thinking too much, but it also seemed like she wasn't thinking at all. Her tolerance was much stronger than expected, but also much weaker. Did she not trust him in her heart?
No, she did.
Even if seeing is believing, she still believed that what really provoked her was the coldness and ruthlessness in his eyes. There was no trace of her at all. That was why she didn't hesitate to stab him, and that was why she subconsciously deviated from her target. The reason why she made a move was never because she didn't trust him. Under normal circumstances, she probably wouldn't have been able to do it. Sure enough, she was too provoked. Stabbing him once was the same as stabbing him with her own life. If something really happened to him, she might not die with him because she still had a child. However, even if she was alive, she would just be a walking corpse. However, she still had to say that when this man really wanted to lie to her, she couldn't see through him. However, Jingwan didn't know that Li Hongyuan didn't want to lie to her. He was actually using the power of the emotion-sealing goo. He allowed that woman to use the female goo to affect him. In fact, it was a very dangerous thing. If he was careless, he might really have a change of heart. Li Hongyuan didn't seem to feel anything as he let Gong Jiu do whatever he wanted to his body. His gaze was always on Jingwan. Looking at her expression, his heart ached. However, even if he had no choice, the damage was done. There would always be some scars left. Even if it couldn't be seen at all, it didn't mean that it didn't exist. Li Hongyuan reached out and gently stroked Jingwan's neck. Does it hurt here? Jingwan frowned slightly and was a little puzzled. It doesn't hurt. Why does it hurt? Wan Fengfei has the mother goo of the substitute goo in her body. You have the child goo in your body. The child takes the mother's place. You have to bear half of the pain caused by the external force on her body. Li Hongyuan explained, but he saw that Jingwan didn't seem to feel any pain. Was it because the mother goo died, so there was no effect? However, when the mother goo died, the host of the child goo would not die, but would weaken. In fact, Jingwan attacking him was more or less expected. But killing another person without mercy was really unexpected, because she had always been soft-hearted and cherished human life. If he had a little foresight in advance, he would have stopped her. Jingwan forgot about the substitute goo. She didn't realize it when she killed the person. However, it doesn't hurt. It didn't hurt from the beginning to the end. Jingwan's gaze fell on the corpse on the ground. This was killed by her, but she didn't feel any psychological discomfort. The so-called substitute goo, could it be a lie? The purpose is just to restrain you from attacking her? It's not impossible. However, he still needed to confirm it. Although Li Hongyuan had already thought of ways to protect Jingwan's weak body, now there was another possibility. Naturally, he hoped that Jingwan was safe and healthy. However, Jingwan noticed another important point. You said she is Wan Fengfei? That's right. What his subordinates didn't know, he knew. It wasn't that he paid attention to Wan Fengfei, but it was a coincidence. Wan Fengfei had a special birthmark under her collarbone. In his previous life, when she threw herself into his arms, he had seen it. Because of its special shape, it left a little impression. And when she wore the barbarian tribe's clothing, the collar was much lower, so he could see it. The impression in the depths of Li Hongyuan's memory was dug out again. Although he didn't remember it immediately, he felt it was familiar. He finally found the origin. Speaking of which, Li Hongyuan's memory was indeed quite good. Jingwan nodded faintly. It was Wan Fengfei. Then she had a clear conscience. She had long wanted to kill her. Once, after she understood some things, she felt a little regretful that she had died. She didn't expect that she was so lucky. After escaping from Prince Zhongqin's mansion, she never gave up and was always jumping around. Now that she killed her with her own hands, it was a bit like slapping an annoying bug to death instead of killing a person. This time, it was impossible for her to jump around. It was too easy for her to die so simply. However, she was simply a cockroach. It was good for her to die so thoroughly. Li Hongyuan's wound was simply treated. Obviously, this was far from enough. The group went back to the house where Li Hongyuan lived before, leaving Wan Fengfei's body there. Speaking of which, perhaps because she was too confident, Wan Fengfei didn't have her own people by her side. So, until now, those people hadn't found out that she was dead. However, this was also a matter of time. When the time came, it would be a fierce battle. When Gong Jiu further checked the specific condition of Li Hongyuan's injury and treated the wound, Jingwan was still a little absent-minded. What's wrong? Don't worry, it's all right. Li Hongyuan really didn't know how to talk to Jingwan now. He was a little helpless. It seemed that no matter what he said, it would be pale and powerless. Anything he said would be suspected of sophistry. He wanted to avoid it, but some things, if avoided, would only rot in the deep layer. Therefore, he could only try to ease it as much as possible, but it still seemed a little far-fetched. Jingwan looked at him. She didn't deny that she was worried. In fact, she was so worried that her heart almost stopped beating, but she didn't regret it. If I could do it again, I would still stab you. So, Wan's heart is very soft to outsiders, but it's as hard as a stone to me. Li Hongyuan pretended to be wronged, but there was a smile in his eyes. It was enough to show that he didn't mind this matter. Well, if there's a next time, I will still do it. At that time, you may not be so lucky. Jingwan stated a fact lightly. You made such a big move to give me time to block it. Sure enough, your heart is actually not hard enough. So, according to your reaction speed, you can completely block it. Why didn't you? He didn't even raise his hand. It's a gift from my wife. Naturally, no matter what it is, I have to accept it. Li Hongyuan smiled. Looking at Jingwan's pursed lips, he finally straightened his expression. Today, even if you don't do it, I will do it myself. So, what's the way to solve the love-sealing goo? Under normal circumstances, when the female goo dies, the connection between the pair of love-sealing goo will also be cut off. But Wan Fangfei has a substitute goo, so I can't kill her or even hurt her. I can only think of another way. Logically speaking, there's no other way to unlock the love-sealing goo poison. However, there's a special situation where the love-sealing goo poison can't bind both hosts together. The male love-sealing goo poison has someone else in his heart. Then, the love-sealing goo poison can be unlocked by the love-sealing goo poison. Li Hongyuan looked at Jingwan. He wasn't sure if she could accept such an explanation. So, in essence, you want me to hate you? Is it that, in your opinion, the deeper the love, the deeper the hatred when betrayed? You also know that I won't rub sand in my eyes. Even if I know it's caused by external factors, I won't accept it? But Yuan, do you know that from the beginning to the end, I have never hated you? I love you with all my heart, and I can't take out the same heart to hate you. Moreover, I have always believed in you. Even if I don't have clear thoughts in my consciousness, this has never changed. Now tell me, did your method succeed, or did I kill Wan Fangfei to get rid of the love-sealing goo? Jingwan's expression was indifferent. At this time, there was finally a change in her expression. That dagger, it's not because you have a change of heart, but because you don't have me in your eyes. How can you not have me in your eyes? Her voice gradually rose, and at this time, she was almost shouting. Don't talk about love-sealing. Even if you have forgotten everything, you can't not have me in your eyes. You can't. Seeing the hysterical Jingwan, Li Hongyuan felt very distressed, but he also felt very happy. What should he do? He was selfish. He had never thought of only giving without receiving anything in return. He had been waiting for Jingwan to return the same feelings as him. Today, he obviously got it. He wanted to hug her and kiss her. In fact, he did do so. However, the white cloth on his body was only half wrapped. Gong Jiu originally tried his best to ignore the sweet and bitter atmosphere between the two masters. He wanted to quickly deal with it and then quickly leave. In the end, he still did not achieve his goal. When the prince hugged the princess, he had to withdraw his hand. It was better to leave and wait for the princess's mood to stabilize. Anyway, although the heart was indeed hurt, it was not deep. It was only at the periphery and did not hurt the major blood vessels. It was okay to stop the bleeding and slow down. Gong Jiu went out and met the eyes of others. His body was a little stiff. He did not feel embarrassed just now, but now he was embarrassed. I'm going to prepare the medicine. He waved his sleeves and left quickly. He hugged Jingwan and kissed her fiercely. He wanted to completely possess her, but now he did not have the right time, place, and people, so he had to give up. Wan, it's my fault. I promise there won't be a next time. Believe me, nothing is more important to me than you. Even if you are not in my eyes, you are all in my heart. I love you, I love you, I love you. Li Hongyuan held Jingwan in his arms, stroked her back, and whispered softly. Jingwan wept silently. In her entire life as Luo Jingwan, the amount of tears she had shed was not as much as the amount she shed for him, even when she was still a baby. Don't do such a ridiculous thing again. Next time, I will really kill you. If one knife doesn't work, I will chop you into pieces. There won't be a next time, there won't be a next time, there won't be a next time. Jingwan could vent her anger, and she also knew the root of the problem. Li Hongyuan breathed a sigh of relief. He was really afraid that she would be as dull as before. However, his wife had not changed at all. When she was ruthless, she was really ruthless. Jingwan left a deeper impression on others. Even Nanny Gong probably did not expect that Jingwan would do such a thing. The things involved were completely beyond the emotional problems between husband and wife. He was a prince, favored by the emperor. Even as his wife, not to mention almost killing him, even if she only had such an intention, it was a big crime that would bring disaster to the whole family, and even the whole family. However, Jingwan did so without any hesitation. She aimed at his heart, which meant that she was going to die. If it were other people, even if they hated him to the extreme and were in extreme pain, they would never do such a thing. They would not even have such an idea. Of course, ambitious women or women with ulterior motives were excluded. Their nature was different. However, when they killed someone, they would probably only use underhanded means behind their backs. They would not be like Jingwan, who did it openly and openly in front of everyone. However, Wang Ye's reaction was not unexpected. However, once again, he deeply realized that Wang Fei had a special place in Wang Ye's heart. Therefore, the most important master was still Wang Fei. In the future, he should take it easy. Wang Fei might look gentle, but when she was angry or ruthless, she would definitely kill people. The previous things seemed to have exhausted Jingwan's energy. At this moment, she leaned in Li Hongyuan's arms and fell asleep. Sure enough, no matter what happened, this man's arms were the safest harbor for her. This had formed unconsciously. Before falling in love with him, she was rational and absolutely independent in her thoughts. She did not rely on others, but became others' harbor invisibly. Li Hongyuan held Jingwan. He did not deliberately be careful, but he knew what kind of posture could make Jingwan sleep comfortably. However, when he was not facing Jingwan, now he was the real king of hell. Perhaps he was not as cold and terrifying as when he was locked in love, but his momentum was still breathtaking, making people breathless. After Gong Jiu confirmed that there was no goo in Jingwan's body, Li Hongyuan's heart returned to the original place. The thing he cared about most was solved. There was nothing else that could restrain him. Then, there was no need to suppress his anger for scheming against Jingwan. The ice covering the volcano that was about to erupt had been broken. No matter who it was, they would have to pay for what they had done. As for how many innocent people would be involved during this period, it was not within his scope of consideration. As this period of time, Gong Jiu came into contact with and understood more and more goo. His memory of goo also increased day by day. It just inexplicably appeared out of nowhere. Until now, he might have become a person who understood goo, at least in theory. However, the origin of these memories was still unknown. Perhaps there would be an answer in the future, or perhaps there would never be an answer. However, after more understanding, Gong Jiu noticed that there were traces of goo in his body. Now that the goo worm had disappeared, if he guessed correctly, it should be the forgetting goo. Forgetting only things related to goo. Perhaps it was because of the disappearance of the goo worm that he inexplicably gained more memories. He was interested in goo worms. As for how he knew these things, he did not care. It did not matter whether he knew it or not. When he became a shadow guard, everything in the past, whether it was love or hate, had become a past tense. Because a shadow guard was only a subordinate of the master and had no ego. Being interested in goo did not mean that he wanted to raise it. Know thyself and know thy enemy to win 100 battles. He just did not want to suffer from goo poison in the future. However, when he first used the goo to remove the emotion-locking goo, his prediction was wrong. However, by a freak combination of factors, he still achieved his final goal. If he encountered it again in the future, he should be more cautious. Naturally, Wan Fangfei's body had already been discovered. It was later than expected, which showed how unpopular she was. However, her existence was special after all. It might be quiet in the thatched hut, but outside, it was already at daggers drawn. Li Hongyuan's order was only one word: kill. Jingwan had to take care of the fetus, and Li Hongyuan had to recuperate. They both needed a quiet and stable environment. Therefore, even if he knew what was happening outside, Li Hongyuan did not let it affect the hut. Whether it was Gong Jiu or Mama Gong, they were all doing their own things. It seemed that what happened outside had nothing to do with them. As for Jingwan, she slept for almost a day and a night. After Gong Jiu repeatedly confirmed that she was just sleeping, Li Hongyuan was finally relieved. During this period, he also took a few appropriate breaks, but each time was not considered long. Right now, he still needed to take charge of the overall situation. After Jingwan woke up, she did not expect to sleep for so long. However, her spirit came back, especially after Li Hongyuan personally fed her enough food. She was a bit like when she was raised in the prince's mansion. After recovering, there were some things that she could face. "Ah, Yuan, Where did your emotion-locking goo come from? Was it also silently planted by someone? Jingwon did not believe this possibility. Because of the substitute goo, Wan Fengfei wanted to plant the emotion-locking goo in me while drawing a knife on herself. Therefore, Li Hongyuan did not hesitate to accept the substitute goo. Jingwon was speechless. Even if it was proven that he had been lied to at that time, even if he was 99% sure that it was true, he would not have hesitated because he cared too much about it. So he would rather believe it than not. If it did not involve her, how could such a simple and crude method work on him? It's just a bug. I never thought it had the ability to reach the heavens. The fact is, you did fall for it. Jingwon ridiculed. Well, she actually did not believe in the ability of the bug. Wan, don't hit people in the face and don't expose people's shortcomings. Wan Fengfei should have been under control, but in the end, she escaped. Jingwon continued to expose the shortcomings of the bug mercilessly. Li Hongyuan was helpless. His wife was obviously still angry. I suspected it and had people investigate it, but they didn't find anything, so I didn't care. After all, we were not in the capital when Prince Zhong's mansion caught fire. I underestimated some people and caused negligence. It won't happen again in the future. Sure enough, they should eliminate the root of the problem from the beginning, but you can't generalize everything. Everything depends on the situation. Regarding Wan Fengfei, she might have to bear a little responsibility. At that time, she thought that Wan Fengfei had schemed against her and the Luo family, which made her angry. At one time, she felt that it was too easy to trample her to death. Someone had been secretly spying on her, so it was not surprising that he knew her thoughts. The things that happened later really made Wan Fengfei suffer a fate worse than death. According to someone's style, he might have killed Wan Fengfei from the beginning. So, this pit, she dug it herself in the beginning? Jingwon expressed that she did not want to admit it. She had long forgotten about what happened 800 years ago. However, at this moment, Jingwon did not feel that Wan Fengfei's death was too easy. Sure enough, she should be more decisive. This statement was quite strong, with an imposing manner that could not be refuted. His wife was prepared to not be merciful. Li Hongyuan could only be helpless. Who asked him to be in the wrong this time?
He was weak.
However, speaking of which, it was obvious that he was injured. No one comforted him. No one felt sorry for him. This was fine, but he still had to be humble. However, who asked this to be the most precious treasure in his hands? He could only pinch his nose and accept it. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.